Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Today we've got a few things to discuss, including a couple of injury updates from around the NHL, a couple of trades to discuss, and some injury updates involving the Vancouver Canucks, San Jose Sharks, Boston Bruins, a few centers with long-term contracts, and the Washington Capitals. We'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now I'll kick things off today by discussing a channel update for us, as we are just about a week away from the trade deadline. So with the trade deadline being so close, over the next week, I will still be doing my scheduled videos on Tuesday and Thursday, although I may do a couple of more. If there's some significant trades or something, I may do a small video discussing those sorts of deals. If there's a really significant trade that happens before I do any of my videos over the next week, I may do a small video discussing it, so definitely keep a lookout for that. If not, I'll definitely be posting it on my blog, so definitely check out the End-to-End Hockey blog. I also keep up to date on some of the latest news and rumors on that too, so definitely check that out. And on March 3rd, which is the trade deadline, I'm going to be doing a live trade deadline blog post. So definitely check that out on March 3rd when it's a trade deadline, as I'll be trying to keep up to date on all the latest news and rumors on trade deadline day. So that's going to be interesting to see, and I would definitely ask that you check that out on March 3rd. But definitely going to be an interesting week. We're probably going to have a lot more trades to discuss from over the next week, so definitely check out for a couple more videos this week, as there's going to be a ton of trades. And then also check out my blog posts, as I may have some trade updates there as well. So definitely keep an eye out for those things over the week, as I'll try and give you my opinion on all of the latest news and rumors from around the NHL. Now that's the channel update I wanted to discuss. Usually I'll kick off the video by discussing a signing or two, but since we had the Mata signing, there's not been any signings to discuss, so we'll go straight over to the injury update part of the video. We'll start with the Washington Capitals, as they've gotten both good and bad news on the injury front. First, with the good news, they activated Tom Wilson and Nick Dowd off of injury reserve, and both returned to game action. Now, both have been out for a while. Dowd's been out for over a month. Wilson was only out for about 3 weeks, but both did miss significant time due to lower body injuries. For Wilson, he had missed a lot of the season prior to early January. He was back for a couple of weeks, and then he suffered another injury, and he's been out for the last couple of weeks. So to get him back is huge. He's a key piece of their top six. We know that Alex Ovechkin's currently away from the Washington Capitals right now, and the Capitals haven't done overly well in the last few games. So to get Wilson back is good. That's a huge boost to their top six. As for Dowd, he's not as big of an addition as Wilson, but Dowd is a stellar fourth-line forward who can kill penalties and is a really good player in that bottom six role. So to get a couple of healthy bodies back into the lineup is really good for the Washington Capitals. Wilson will help with the offensive side. He's a good top six forward, a little bit more of a physical style forward as well, but I definitely think he can definitely provide a boost for Washington. And Dowd, even though he's not as big of an addition as Wilson, is still a really good fourth line forward, and he should be able to help that Capitals team as much as he can as well. So getting Dowd and Wilson back, huge boosts for the Washington Capitals. As for the other injury, they have announced that Anthony Mantha is out day-to-day right now with upper body injury, so not good for Mantha. There's a lot of speculations about Mantha's future in Washington this year, given the fact that he's been a healthy scratch on occasions, and he just hasn't been able to find that good, secure role with the Capitals this year. So hopefully Mantha can get back in the near future. I know he's also recently coming off an injury, and he was only back for like a week before this injury, so not good news for Mantha, but hopefully it's not too long-term of an injury. It is only day-to-day, so I wouldn't expect it to be much longer than at least the next week. So hopefully Mantha can get back in the near future and help this Caps team. Then getting Wilson and Dowd back is a huge boost to the Capitals team, and there's something they'll really need, is they're in the heat of a playoff race right now, and they're definitely trying to make a playoff push. So good to see Wilson and Dowd get back, and hopefully Mantha can return in the very near future. As for the Vancouver Canucks, they have had a couple of injuries as well, as Travis Dermott and Oliver Ekman-Larsson have been placed on injury reserve due to injuries. Curtis Lazar is currently out due to an injury of his, and William Lockwood has been activated off of injury reserve and gone back into game action. Now for Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Travis Dermott, it does not look good right now. Dermott is currently on IR. He has been out with an undisclosed injury and is going to be out for an unknown period of time, so really bad news for Vancouver. While the Canucks not had a really good defensive core this year, I think Dermott's done okay as a third pair defenseman. So I think that the Dermott loss is going to be bad for Vancouver for the next probably week, 2 weeks. Not really sure given the fact it's an unknown time period. But hopefully Dermott's not out too long. Hopefully it's only like a couple of weeks that he's out and he can return in the near future. As for Oliver Ekman-Larsson, he's out week to week right now due to an ankle injury. So that's not really good. There's some talk that could be probably a couple of weeks from now before Oliver Ekman-Larsson returns. So I definitely do think Ekman-Larsson will probably return before the end of the season, but the Canucks could be without him for the next couple of weeks. So not really good news for the Vancouver Canucks there. Ekman-Larsson, while he hasn't been a really great defenseman this year, is still one of the Canucks' top 4 defensemen and a really good minute eater for the Vancouver Canucks. So hopefully he gets back in the near future and he's not out too long. Even though he hasn't been the best of defensemen, he's still a really viable and good top 4 defenseman. So I definitely think that losing OEL and Dermott really weakens that blue line, and they'll have to just make do with some of their other guys right now. As for Curtis Lazar, he hasn't been placed in injury reserve to this point and is out with a lower body injury right now day to day. So hopefully it's not too long for Lazar. He's a really good fourth line forward, can kill penalties for the Canucks, and has done really well in his role with Vancouver this year. So hopefully he's not out too long. It's only day to day, so maybe he's out for the next week, maybe 2 weeks, but I wouldn't expect Lazar to be out for too long. So hopefully Lazar can get back in the game action in the near future, and Dermott and OEL are out for too long. But on the good side, that Will Lockwood was able to return after suffering a concussion about a month ago. So it's good to see Lockwood get back to game action. He's a pretty good forward for the Vancouver Canucks. He's been a call-up a couple times this year. He's more of a fringe NHL forward right now, but I think he does have bottom 6 potential in the long run. So good to see Lockwood get back. It was really bad for him to get a concussion about 3 weeks, maybe a month ago. So given the fact he's missed that much time, it's really good to see him get back into game action. And hopefully Lockwood can continue to push for a consistent bottom 6 forward spot with the Vancouver Canucks. So hopefully Lockwood can continue to play well for the Vancouver Canucks, and OEL and Dermott aren't out for too long, and Lazar can return into game action soon, as the Canucks are a little bit banged up right now and could really use some healthy bodies. Next is the Chicago Blackhawks. They've had a couple of injuries, as forwards Reese Johnson, Mackenzie Entwistle, and defenseman Jarred Tinordi have all gone down with injuries and are going to miss the next little bit due to them. Now, Mackenzie Entwistle has a wrist injury. He's out day to day, and he's the only one of the 3 who has so far been placed on injury reserve. So, not good news for Entwistle. It's only day to day, and he was recently just placed on injury reserve, so he's probably going to be out for at least the next week, maybe 2 weeks, but I wouldn't expect it to be too long for Entwistle. He's shown this year he could be a really good bottom 6 forward for the Blackhawks, and I would expect him to definitely continue to be pushing for a top 9 role for the Blackhawks, especially if the Hawks continue to sell off pieces like Kane, Nansenisiu, Domi, etc. So if they can continue to sell off pieces, I could definitely see Entwistle take like a 3rd line role for the rest of the season at least. So hopefully Entwistle can get back in the near future. He's not a bad forward, and he's actually done quite well in the bottom 6. As for Reese Johnson and Jarred Tinordi, they're both going to be out for an unknown period of time. Johnson has a concussion, and Tinordi has a lower body injury, and both are going to be out for an unknown period of time. So it's really hard to decipher when those two are going to get back. Johnson's been a really good bottom 6 forward for the Blackhawks, sometimes been a healthy scratch, but for the most part he's been able to get into game action and be a good bottom 6 forward for Chicago. Tinordi was claimed off of waivers at the beginning of the season by the Blackhawks, and he has definitely dealt with his fair share of injuries this year. Definitely been a really injured player for the Hawks, but he's also been a really good physical 3rd pair defenseman for the Blackhawks as well. So hopefully Tinordi and Johnson can get back in the near future and they're not out for overly too long. And hopefully Entwistle is only out for about a week. And hopefully these guys can continue to get healthy and get back into game action, as the Hawks are gearing up to be sellers and they're going to need as many healthy bodies as they can if they continue to move on from a couple of other guys. So getting guys like these guys back is going to be big for the Hawks. Next, with the San Jose Sharks, they've had a couple of injury updates, as Kaapo Kähkönen and Nico Sturm have returned from injury, Jonah Gadjevich and Timo Meier are out due to injury, and Radim Šimić has been cleared to play, and he should be activated and get back into game action in the very near future. Now, for the Sharks, for both Sturm and Kähkönen, they both suffered upper body injuries, and were both back within 2 days of suffering that injury. So they weren't out for too long. I know it was definitely an injury scare last week when Kähkönen went down due to the injury, and they already had Reimer out. So it was good to see Kähkönen stay healthy, and Sturm's been a really good bottom 6 forward for the Sharks this year. So it was good to see both of those two stay healthy and remain in the lineup for the Sharks. As for Gadjevich, He's going to be out week to week right now with the upper body injury, so it's not good for him. He's been placed in injury reserve, so I definitely think it could be out for a couple of weeks. Gadjevich has been a fringe fourth-line forward, not really being a consistent fourth-line forward this year, but I definitely think he has potential to be a good physical fourth-line forward in a year or two. So I definitely think that the loss of Gadjevich is not going to be overly great for the Sharks, but I do think that they should be able to get over the loss of Gadjevich. Meier being out is a really significant one given the fact he's a huge trade chip right now. Currently out due to an upper body injury in his day-to-day. There's been a lot of talk from sources that know that Meier's going to be traded, that this isn't a significant injury. It's only day-to-day right now, so I wouldn't expect Meier to be out for too long. And with him being possibly traded soon, maybe it's just best that he sits and waits for a trade anyway. So I definitely think that Meier being out is not good, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be too long, so I wouldn't expect this to hinder a trade. And lastly here with Adam Šimik, he was dealing with upper body injury. He's been out for quite a while now, but he has been cleared to play, so he should be back in the near future. Šimik's been a really decent third pair defenseman for the Sharks, and I would expect him to continue to do well for San Jose. So hopefully Šimik can get back in the near future. Hopefully he gets back at some point this week. Definitely not a guarantee, but I would definitely think it's possible that Šimik gets back at some point this week. As for the other injuries, good to see Kapanen and Sturm not be out for too long. Hopefully Gadget returns in the near future. And hopefully Meier's injury is not something to be dealt with past this week. Lastly, here with the Toronto Maple Leafs, they've had a few injury updates. After 3 weeks on injury reserve and missing the All-Star game, Auston Matthews has returned from his knee injury and has gone back into game action. Matthews is a huge piece of the Maple Leafs top six, so to get him back into game action, really good for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And getting their top goal scorer back is really good for Toronto. As for the other injuries, Rasmus Sandin's day-to-day right now with an upper body injury, so not really good news. He's only day-to-day, so I wouldn't expect Sandin to be out for too long, but he's shown this year that he's a really good top 6 defenseman, at least right now, top 4 defenseman of the future, so I would definitely expect Sandin to hopefully get back within the next week, maybe 2 weeks. But it's not a guarantee, so hopefully Sandin does return in the near future. And I don't think this comes as much surprise, but Jake Muzzin is going to be out for the rest of the season and most likely the playoffs too, due to a back spine injury. So not good news for Muzzin. He's definitely had his fair share of injuries this year, so hopefully he can recover at some point and his career's not over. I've definitely seen a couple of people say his career could possibly be over. Hopefully that's not the case, and he can recover from his injury and maybe be back next year to return from his injury, but definitely not good news for Muzzin, and hopefully he recovers and is doing okay, but not good news to see him go out for the season and most likely the playoffs as well. So definitely good to get Matthews back. We expected Muzzin to be out, so it's not surprising to see this, but definitely bad news, and hopefully Sandin can get back in the near future to help this Leafs continue to be one of the stronger teams in the NHL. Now that's all the injury updates I want to talk about for today. Next we'll go over to a couple of trades that happened recently. I'll start with the Arizona Coyotes and the Vegas Golden Knights, as the Vegas Golden Knights sent the contract of Shea Weber and a 2023 5th-round pick to the Arizona Coyotes in exchange for the defenseman Dyson Mayo. Now this is a really small deal, but it's a significant one. Start with the Golden Knights. They get rid of the Shea Weber contract. Now he's making $7.86 million for this year plus 3 more seasons. But he's also retired due to some injuries. So they had him on long-term injury reserve. They acquired the contract in the offseason to get rid of the Dadonov contract. And they were able to offload him to Arizona. I know there were some that thought that Weber contract would be moved to Arizona last offseason, and it did sound like there was some serious dialogue between the Yotes and the Canadiens. But ultimately, the Canadiens decided to make the deal with Vegas, and now the Golden Knights send it to Arizona. So the 5th-round pick, just some more draft capital for the Arizona Coyotes to take on the contract. I don't think the Golden Knights are really too worried about a 5th-round pick, especially given the fact that it allowed them to get out of the contract. And while Weber is retired, and he's never going to play again, that this trade does help the Golden Knights for the off-season, because it does free up a little bit of cap space for them to go out and do some moves. So given the fact that we already know Mark Stone's injured, they're probably going to try and go after someone before the deadline. Now this gives them a little more cap flexibility for the off-season to work with. So good news for the Golden Knights to get out of the Weber contract in exchange to get Dyson Mayo, who is a good depth defenseman. He had 12 points in 67 NHL games last year, played majority of the season in the NHL, but due to some moves in the offseason, Arizona didn't really have much need for him at the NHL level this year, so they moved him down to the AHL after he didn't have any points in 15 NHL games. currently has a couple of points in 26 AHL games for Arizona's affiliate, so I would expect him to go straight to the Golden Knights affiliate. But if they were to run into some injuries, I think Mayo could definitely be a good call-up option for the Golden Knights. So good for the Knights. As for the Arizona Coyotes, Weber's not going to be placed on long-term injury reserve. Instead, he'll be placed just on regular injury reserve, so that Weber's contract will count for their cap for this year. And given the fact Arizona is looking to move out some players, but they don't want to take on contracts, I think this is a brilliant move. Getting Weber's contract will allow him to move guys like Schenn, Nick Ritchie, and Jacob Chikrin without having to worry about them going under the cap floor. So I think this is a really good move for both teams. The Knights get rid of the Weber contract, get a little bit more cap flexibility for the offseason, and get a good depth defenseman. As for the Arizona Coyotes, this gives them a little bit of cap flexibility right now to make a couple of trades before a deadline. And they also get a 5th round pick in return. So I think it's a really good move, really small move, but a significant one for the Golden Knights and the Arizona Coyotes. I don't think there's a real winner in this trade here, but it just does help Vegas' salary cap for the future and help Arizona's salary cap right now. So definitely want to know what you think about this deal between the Arizona Coyotes and the Vegas Golden Knights. As for the other deal, it's a little bit more significant, as the Chicago Blackhawks acquire Nikita Zaitsev from the Ottawa Senators, as well as a 2023 second round pick and a 2026 fourth round pick in exchange for future considerations, which is usually nothing. So this is a really significant deal because this frees up a ton of money for Ottawa. We know that Ottawa has been really trying to get out of the Nikita Zaitsev deal. He hasn't done the best over the past few seasons with the Senators. I mean, this year he has definitely not done great. He's been more of a 7th, 8th defenseman on the Senators lineup. He currently has 5 assists in 28 NHL games and has played in the AHL as well, so not too surprised that the Sens were able to move him. There was a lot of talk that it would take a second round pick to move him, so it wound up being a second and a fourth to move on from Zaitsev. But this gives the Sens a little bit more room to work with to try and add some players. So we know that the Sens are not looking like they're going to make the playoffs, but there's a chance they do try and go after a defenseman, given the fact that they really have been looking for a defenseman this year. And there was a lot of talk that they would need to move Zaitsev out before they were able to do that. But now they have Zaitsev out. Zaitsev has this year plus next year at $4.5 million. So good to see Ottawa get out from that contract. I know a lot of Sens fans were really upset with that contract and really upset with how Zaitsev has been playing. So good to see him move on from Ottawa, and hopefully he can do well in Chicago. As for the Blackhawks, we know they're about to be going on as full sellers, probably moving guys like Anthony Ciu, Max Domi, Patrick Kane. We know there's been some talk about maybe a Colin Blackwell, Jake McCabe, Connor Murphy, Sam Lafferty. So the Hawks are going to be a very active team, I expect, over the next week. And they're going to need some cap space. Now we know that Toews is not going to be moved, so that $10.5 million will be staying on the cap. And now they get another $4.5 million in Zaitsev. So I think it's very likely that the Hawks don't really have to worry now about going possibly under the cap, given the fact that Toews is staying with them and they now have Zaitsev. So it's good to see the Hawks utilize their cap space. This is sort of what Arizona's been doing over the past few seasons, taking on bad contracts and getting draft capital in return. That 2023 second round pick could be like a top 15 pick for the Hawks in the second round. So definitely good for a rebuilding team to get that high of a draft selection in the second round, especially with the deep draft we have this year. As for the fourth round pick, that's a ways away, but it's definitely some more draft capital for the Hawks. So definitely good to see the Hawks and Sens make this move. For the Sens, it frees up cap space. They can now go after a top 4 defenseman for the deadline. For the Hawks, they get some more draft capital. They take on the Zaitsev contract. He's also signed for next year, so now have another roster player for the upcoming season. And this allows them to not really have to worry about possibly going under the cap floor while they're making trades before the deadline. So definitely a good trade between Ottawa and Chicago. So a couple of cap moves have happened over the past little while, but definitely going to be interesting to see what are some of the next moves for all of these teams as we get closer to the trade deadline. Those are the only 2 trades I wanted to discuss today. Next we'll go over to the trade rumor part of the video. So with the San Jose Sharks, as Timo Meier is drawing a lot of interest. Now we know that the Jersey Devils are the front runners for Meier right now. We know that the Carolina Hurricanes are looking at him. We know that the Vegas Golden Knights have checked in on him, but 2 new teams seem to have entered the mix, with Toronto now going out, as the St. Louis Blues and the Winnipeg Jets seem to be checking in on Timo Meier. Now, on the 32 Thoughts podcast on Monday, Elliot Friedman said that he wonders if the Jets have checked out Meier, and it was once again brought up on TSN Insider Trading. Basically, the sense is that the Jets have a lot of concerns about their future top six. We know that Pierre-Luc Dubois really wants to go to Montreal. Scheifele and Wheeler have 1 year left on their deal, so there's a lot of talk that they could try and bolster that top six with another young player. And Meier would definitely be a good young player to add to that Jets forward group. Now, they said that the Jets would probably want an extension in place. They definitely don't want to just sign Meier to a 1 year extension and have him walk to free agency. So it would definitely have to be sort of like the same situation with Jersey, where they would have to try and at least try and get the framework out for a Meier extension before the trade happens. But definitely keep your eye on Winnipeg, as they could be interested in Meier. As for St. Louis, there's been a lot of talk that they're trying to get a quick retool going. We know they've moved guys like O'Reilly, Tarasenko, Mikkola, Achari, and they've definitely got a lot of draft capital. There's been a lot of talk they'd be willing to move those 2 first-round draft picks they got in those 2 O'Reilly and Tarasenko trades to get a guy like Meier. There's also been some talk around him, the Blues now being linked to Chychrun again, so the Blues are definitely going to be an interesting team to watch. There's still a lot of people out there who think Ivan Barbashev could be moved, which would give them even more draft capital. There's still some who think that a top 4 defenseman could be moved. But now there's a lot of people who think that the Blues are going to use those first-round picks that they got for O'Reilly and Tarasenko and possibly use them in a trade to acquire Timo Meier, as they have good young players like Kyrou and Thomas, and Meier is in the same age range as those two. So definitely going to be interesting to see what happens with those 2 teams. Blues and Jets definitely seem to be having interest in Meier. We know that the Golden Knights have interest, given the fact that they lost Mark Stone and they have a lot of cap space right now. We know that the Canes are looking for scoring help, and they'd be willing to acquire Meier even without an extension. And we know that the Devils still look to be the front runners and are really trying to acquire a good top 6 forward for now and in the future, and Meier could definitely be there. So definitely a handful of teams right now who are linked to Meier, and definitely interesting to see if the Blues and Jets are really serious players for Timo Meier. Next, with the Boston Bruins, we found out over the past little while that it does sound like the Gavrikov deal will happen with the Boston Bruins. David Pageau said on Twitter that sounds like it's the first and the third round pick for Gavrikov, but the Bruins do need to move cap space to make the deal work. And the Jackets, if the Bruins don't find enough cap space in time and they get a better offer, might be willing to shift gears and look at another team's offer if it's better. So definitely going to be interested to see, but it does sound like Boston's trying to move out cap space right now. We know that Mike Reilly, who has been sent down to the AHL earlier in the season, definitely wants out of Boston, given the fact that he doesn't have much opportunity to get NHL playing time right now. We also know that it sounds like they're shopping Craig Smith as well. Smith has 1 year left at $3.1 million. Reilly has this year, next year at $3 million. So definitely going to be interesting to see if the Bruins do make a move. I would definitely think that we know that the Maple Leafs made their big move acquiring O'Reilly, and we know that the Bruins probably want to try and keep up with the teams in the Atlantic Division as well. So they definitely really would like Gavrikov. I think adding a top 4 defenseman, especially on the left side, would be good for them. But definitely need to move out some cap space first. So keep an eye out for a Smith or Mike Reilly deal. And if Craig Smith or Mike Reilly wind up getting moved, expect a Gavrikov deal to follow shortly after. Definitely expect the Bruins to be trying to actively shed cap to try and improve this team. So definitely keep an eye out for Smith and Reilly to possibly be moved by the Bruins before the deadline. Next here with Luke Schenn, as there have been some talk recently that a Schenn trade is picking up. Schenn was supposed to travel with the team to Nashville, and he was sent home to Vancouver due to the fact that it sounded like a trade was nearing. Now, this was on Tuesday, and it's right now Thursday, and we don't have a deal in place yet, so it definitely hasn't happened yet, but it does sound like a Schenn deal could be nearing. It definitely sounds like the Canucks will get at least a third-round pick, possibly more, from a deal for Schenn, so I would definitely think that Schenn could be moved in the very near future. He's a good, cheap defenseman. The Bruins, even though they're linked to Gavrikov, are still being linked to Luke Schenn. I've also heard the Pittsburgh Penguins be a team who has been mentioned in Schenn rumors recently. It doesn't sound like Calgary's as interested right now, so definitely going to be interested to see. I'd like to know what you think. Does Schenn get moved in the near future, and if so, which team do you think winds up acquiring Luke Schenn? Next, over with the center group, as a couple of reports have come out that with the dwindling center market, with Horvat with the Islanders and O'Reilly with the Maple Leafs, and Jonathan Toews not being moved anymore, that teams to look to some players with term to try and acquire before a deadline. Now we know that there's still a couple of other guys. Monahan, if he's healthy and the Canadiens do wind up trading him, could be a good third, second line option for a couple of teams. Max Domi could also be a good option for a couple of teams, but there's not really too much significant center depth. So I've definitely seen some reports that maybe the Islanders will be willing to move Jean-Gabriel Pageau and the Flyers will be willing to move Kevin Hayes. Now, these two are actually similar type players. They're both signed for this year plus 3 more seasons. Hayes at a $7.14 million cap hit. Pageau at an even $5 million cap hit. Pageau's not had as good of a season as last year, having 29 points in 56 games, whereas last year he had 39 points in 77 games. But he's definitely been a really good power play player for the Islanders this year. As for Hayes, he's having a career season. Last year he dealt with a lot of off-ice stuff and had a long-term injury, and he only had 31 points in 48 games. This year, he has 48 points in 58 games, and he's never hit the 50-point mark in his career, so it definitely looks like he's going to have a career season this year, and I definitely think that with Hayes and Pageau, there would definitely be some interest. For Hayes, we know the Flyers are willing to move him. They might even be willing to retain some salary if they can get out of that contract. I would definitely think that there would definitely be some teams, especially with how Hayes has played this year, who would have some interest in Hayes. For Pageau, I think it's a little bit less likely given the fact that the Islanders are currently in the midst of a playoff race, and I'm not sure if they would really want to subtract from their roster. So if they were to move Pageau, that might be more of an off-season move. But still, I think Pageau and Hayes could be had for the right price. Hayes more likely than Pageau. I would definitely look at teams like maybe the Carolina Hurricanes and the Colorado Avalanche as teams who could definitely use an upgrade at the center position. We know that Trocheck left in free agency from Carolina, and Kadri left in free agency from Colorado, and neither were really replaced. I mean, Newhook was supposed to be the second-line center in Colorado, Kotkaniemi in Carolina, and neither have really fit in well in that second-line center role. So Hayes and Pageau could possibly be options for them. I would definitely not say it's a guarantee that either are moved before the deadline, but it's definitely a possibility with the dried up center market right now that Hayes and or Pageau could be moved before the deadline. And lastly, with the Washington Capitals, they have started to fall in the standings recently as they have lost a couple of games straight, and their math does not look good for the playoffs. They're currently on the outside looking in, and teams like the Sabres and Red Wings have a couple of games in hand and are only a couple points back as well. So not good news for the Capitals. There's a lot of talk that they could be transitioning to being sellers this year. A lot of the speculation is surrounded around Dmitry Orlov, who a lot of insiders are saying has not sort of been talking extension with the Capitals as of right now, and it doesn't sound like an extension is imminent for Orlov. So if the Capitals continue to lose a couple of games closer to the deadline, they could wind up moving Orlov, who's a really good top 4 defenseman. But this team is loaded with pending unrestricted free agents. I mean, if you look at their forward group, you have Lars Eller, who's a good third-line center, making $3.5 million this year. You have Garnet Hathaway and Connor Sheary, who are both making $1.5 million this year. Hathaway's a good fourth-line forward. Sheary's a good middle six forward. You got Marcus Johansson, who's only making $1.1 million. Another good middle six forward for the Capitals. And Abu Kubel is a good depth forward, sort of fourth-line depth forward, who's only making $1 million this year. So there's a lot of options on the forward group. Also a lot of options on the blue line as well. We just talked about Orlov, how it doesn't sound like a deal is in place and he could be moved. Nick Jensen has a lot cheaper contract at $2.5 million. He could definitely be moved for the right price, possibly, if the Caps don't turn things around. And they definitely have a lot of cheap options, as Trevor Van Riemsdyk only signed for $950,000. Eric Gustafsson signed for $800,000. And Matt Irwin is signed for $750,000. And all of these guys are pending unrestricted free agents. So if the Caps cannot turn around in the near future and are still not looking good in the playoff race, it's quite possible that guys like Orlov, Eller, Jensen, Van Riemsdyk, Gustafsson, Hathaway, Sheary, there's a lot of possible moving out options for the Capitals. And we know that they only have John Carlson signed on the defensive end for next year. So they could definitely move out a couple of forwards or pending unrestricted free agents for maybe a guy who signed past this year for the Capitals. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how the next week plays out for the Capitals, and if they do wind up being sellers before the deadline. We'd like to know what you think. Are the Capitals sellers? And if so, who do you think they'll wind up trading before the deadline? Now that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog which I'll leave a link to in the description below. Check out the N10 Hockey blog, where I also do some news and rumors updates there as well. And definitely keep up to date this week on the channel, as I might do a couple extra videos this week for discussing some major trades that happened throughout the NHL. And also take a look at my blog. Also keep in mind that I will be doing a March 3rd trade deadline blog, so keep that in mind. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.